Hi everyone, welcome to the third webinar in the webinar series Network States and New Countries titled Ideologies and Identities. I'm very pleased to have you all in the call, and we are continuing to cover this important topic series about how to establish new countries, how to build network states in this tumultuous, capricious international climate. And I'm very glad to have wonderful speakers today who will enrich the scholarship, the discussion with their expertise and experience. So our guests speakers are Joyce Brand, who is the author of Pioneering Prosperity and the co-author of Economics and the Spiritual Life of Free Men. And Joyce is one of the masterminds of the Ciudad Morazan project and one of the most prominent experts in new countries and free cities movement. Um, our next speaker is Nataliya Makulova, who has been in the industry for many years, and she has been doing research on new governance structures and network states. And the next speaker is Andrew Starr, who is one of the most prominent experts in the network states and new countries ecosystem industry. Andrew has been active from the very beginning of the industry when was born actually the industry. And Andrew is also the creator founder of the Country Founders Telegram group, and the next speaker is me. I am Vahram. I am the founder and board chairman of the Panarmenian Network State. So again, welcome everyone, and I hope today we are going to have a very interesting discussion because we are covering a very tough topic concerning the ideology and identity of the people who want to build new countries and network states. I'll be brief with my speech, and we'll focus more on the ethnic identity of the new countries and network states topic, because this is how the idea of building up a pan-Armenian network state actually came up to my mind when in 2020, September 2020, we lost the war against Turkey and Azerbaijan. So what happened actually, I got to question actually myself, how come that we have a big Armenian diaspora everywhere and we cannot use the diaspora resources properly? So that was, and most importantly, the resources regarding uh, intellectual resources, most importantly, and then financial resources. So that was the driving force behind the pan-Armenian network state idea. But then, we expanded, of course. We got to know other network states, free cities, of course, the new country, movements, and we realized that this is a completely new ecosystem industry where we need to explore new possibilities, and that's why we pivoted to more global terrain. It's not just for the Armenian establishment, but it's a more global establishment that covers the global issues, because the humanity has been facing serious vehement challenges actually recently, and first of all, we are humans in the end of the day, on earth, and we must solve those problems together, and also exercising the Armenian establishment resources also there. For example, using the Armenian uh, one of the most Armenian prominent resources, which is the Communicator resource, which is like Armenians acting like a communicator between civilizations, cultures, countries throughout centuries, and now we want also to revive it back. But coming back to the to building up this type of establishments like new countries or network states, I I do think that uh, one of the key requirements is the sense of belonging. I mean, people who end up in one community, who end up in one group, need to understand why they are there. I mean, who they belong to, and what ideology or what goals, what vision they have. This is one of the key things. And for the Armenian case, it's a bit easy to justify because you're an Armenian, based on your ethnicity, you come together. I mean, like you build up in diaspora communities, like Irish community, Greek community, Armenian community, Jewish community. But in the case of the network states, I think it's a bit broader. So because you are going to glue people together so that they feel that they are emotionally, ideologically, and mentally attached to each other. This is one of the toughest tasks, actually, I can say, even with the ethnicity, having ethnicity as a playing card. It's a very tough issue, let alone talking about people who use Bitcoin, or talking about people who just want to avoid paying taxes. In the end of the day, I mean, it's very tough to keep people together for a long period of time. On euphoria level, people will come together definitely for 1 month, for 6 months, for a year, whatever. But for a long-term purpose, it's very difficult to keep people together because when they see that there needs to be a huge task done, then most people definitely leave. I mean, the ship. So that's why this ideology and identity part is very tricky, and I think the main challenge is to find a, a functioning platform where people feel alive. This is very important thing. Like for example, let's compare it with Facebook. Uh, like how Facebook used, I mean, to connect people. In Armenia, Facebook has been very active, and it's still active. Unfortunately, I don't use Facebook, but it's still active. So people kind of try to be in on that platform very much. So, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that platform needs to be a social network. I mean, that platform can be a business platform. That platform can be an exchange platform or whatever. But that platform needs to remind you that it exists every day at least, so that they feel that they are attached. Like you hold a passport of the Republic of Armenia or the United States of America, and that reminds you that you are a citizen of the United States of America. So you need to create something like that glues you, that attaches you to it, that saying that you belong to this community or these establishments or whatever. Um, I must say that we have failed uh, doing so. And I'm sure that this is a very, I mean, new thing, and that still developing process on Earth, actually, not only within the Armenian case, but on Earth. But I'm absolutely certain that the solution will come. The big solution will come. And of course, I mean, my colleagues will tell more about their experience, how they try to, I mean, have people together. I mean, to get people attached to each other as a group, as a community, and as citizens of free cities or new countries or network states. But in the end of the day, huge research needs to be done. I mean, on people's psychology and on people's uh, and on changing environment, how the world is changing, how fast time is changing, and how people's mindset is changing, to understand how we should move forward. But the one good thing is that we are growing, and people here who have their own ventures or their own establishments, they are also growing, which is a good sign. And this is a good start. And as I always say in our meetings, in our webinars, in any conferences, one of the most important tasks for all of us in this network stage new countries, new cities, free cities industry must be to have a coordinated action vis-a-vis the old establishment that we have in the world right now. So if we happen to be successful with building this coordinated action platform, then definitely we will grow much faster than we do now. So thank you again, and welcome again to this webinar. And Joyce, stage is yours.
Thank you. I'm Joyce Brand, and I live in Ciudad Morazan in Honduras, which is a ZE, Zone of Employment and Economic Development. And there's a lot of different narratives about the ZEs and government opposition and all that sort of thing. So I'd like to go back just a little bit to put it in context, what the ZE is. And most people start the narrative with 2009 and Paul Romer's TED Talk about having one government run a small area in another country to give better governance, but I think that's really mistaken. I'd like to go back. It really starts more with the ZOLIs, which is Zona Libre in Honduras, or free trade, or free zones in Honduras, where the idea was to bring in investment and more jobs. And it succeeded in a sense, because they started a whole lot of maquilas. The Zolis were strictly business parks, and because of their starting in Choloma, Choloma grew from 30,000 population to 300,000 in about 20 years. And it did bring a lot of jobs, but they weren't cities. They weren't really, nothing brought them together except just the jobs. And what happened was people came there to get jobs, but they ended up, because they were still living under bad Honduran laws, Honduran corruption, all that sort of thing. They ended up living in slums. I mean, really terrible, subpar living conditions. And it wasn't really creating the prosperity that the originators had hoped for. And in around 2008 or so, there were a couple of Honduran jurists, Hondurans, who wanted to expand on the idea of the free zones to include residents and actual cities rather than just the industrial parks or maquilas, specific factories. And they were the ones that came up with the idea of the ZEs as being autonomous areas with better regulations and governance. And they ask a lot of advice from different people around the world. Paul Romer was only one of them. And their vision was autonomy to bring in real prosperity and better governance. Their first law that they came up with kind of, they say, went too far and was found unconstitutional because too many people felt threatened that their the sovereignty of Honduras was being threatened. So they redid it, and they made a constitutional amendment that sort of clarified all the ambiguities, and they came up with the ZE law, which is a lot of autonomy, but it's still under the Honduran government. So a ZE is like a municipality in that it is a sort of a part of the Honduran government. Only it can be, the ZE has all of this autonomy to make civil and commercial laws that are better than what Honduras has. So a better business environment to bring in more companies, more investment, more jobs, and at the same time create an actual city with residents. They were so there was a lot of corruption in the government even then, and even after they passed the law. It took them 7 years from the time they passed the law until they approved the first two ZEs that were cities, which was Prospera on the island of Roatan and Ciudad Morazan in Choloma. And in that time, Massimo Manzoni learned about the law, and he is an Italian businessman who's built a conglomerate in Honduras over the last 20 some years. And he was motivated by two different things. One was that he has a Honduran wife and children, and he wanted to give back to Honduras. He wanted to actually help the Honduran working people because he saw they were living lives of really no dignity. And things were so bad for them. Single mothers working in maquilas, and their children were being taken by gangs, and it was a terrible, terrible kind of life to live. So that was part of it. The other thing was ideological. He had learned the ideas of Spencer Heath and Spencer McCallum, which were about voluntary contractual governance. It was what Spencer McCallum called entrecoms, where the owners of the land were the ones that provided what we know of as governance services. Government services, of course, has become such a, government's got its finger in everything, and it's providing all these services that should not be provided by the government anyway. But there are some specific services that everybody kind of sees as being public goods that they can't provide for themselves, which would be the three things I see is security, infrastructure, and some kind of legal framework. And those are things that the ZEDEs could provide on a for-profit basis, a voluntary contractual for-profit basis. And that was sort of the ideology behind it. But that went along with the target market of Honduran workers who needed a better life. And that was what Ciudad Morazan was designed to do, was to create this better life for them. And it actually succeeded, and it was doing very well until there was a election in Honduras, which I don't know how most people, or a lot of people know about this, that the socialist government came in and they were opposed to anything that was done by the previous government, and they sort of demonized the ZEDEs and told all kind of lies about them, and managed to repeal the law, but they couldn't legally get rid of the existing ZEDEs, which was Prospero and Ciudad Morazan mainly. What we have found, we only had 1 year to build before the new government came in, which was not enough time to really prove the value of the idea. And because of their opposition, they threatened the manufacturers that were planning on bringing in businesses into Morazan. And so we had to sort of pivot, and Massimo sort of changed to just a residential community. But that residential community has grown. He had only started like 64 houses, so it's not a big community. We're fully rented now and probably have about 150 people. But that's been enough to kind of get an idea of how to build a community. And the community has come together in ways that were in some ways unexpected. The ideological aspect, which I was surprised. I guess we were thinking that the people who wanted to live there would be sort of, looking for freedom and that sort of thing. But it's really not like that. The people came together because they wanted a better life. They wanted the safety that Ciudad Morazan provides. It's the safest community in the area, or maybe in all of Honduras. The cost of living, because Massimo was able to use the ZEDE's freedom of lower regulations, not having to spend money on corruption and permits and ridiculous regulations. He was able to build affordable housing for very low cost. And that's what attracted the people, and is still attracting people, is this is a community that is very safe and has extremely low cost. It's only $120 a month for a nice 2-bedroom house. That attracted the people. But once they got there, we have seen a community coalescing, not around the ideology of the freedom and the entrecom and the idea of better governance and foreign investment, because Massimo's funding the whole thing himself, so there's no foreign investment. But even without the businesses coming in, we see people coming together as a community over basically the rules that they agreed to. And
Just could you sum up, because
yeah,
it's
we're
already
out of
10 minutes.
time.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point was the people have come together because of the rules that they all agree to, even more than the ideology. There is a sense of identity. They're mostly Hondurans, but they've been very accepting of digital nomads and foreigners. So I think it's proven itself, and that's the point.
Thanks a lot, Joyce. Thanks a lot for very insightful intervention. Of course, I mean, during the Q&A session, we are going to cover this more. Thanks a lot. Nataliya, it's your turn. Please share, I mean, your experience with us about the network states. I mean, how you see this ideology, identity dichotomy, and how you see the solution forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Super cool to be here. Thanks, Vahram. Thank you, Joyce. Super interesting to listen about the Zedes and how people come together because of set rules. That makes me think a lot about that. One of the aspects, Joyce, you've mentioned was legal framework. And it brings me back to the infrastructure and security. And I wonder what you mean by infrastructure. Like, I would like to double click on that, understand a little bit more. Maybe in the Q&A, we can touch upon that. But I guess my identity currently is, I like to share from my personal experience. So I'll share with what's happening now in my life. And my identity right now currently revolves around the infrastructure questions, actually. And the idea of homes and where I can stay around the places that I visit, and the people that I'm willing to share a home with, and curating that network of individuals or places where I feel at home. So thinking about that idea of home and creating an infrastructure around that is a key in my practice at this time. And figuring out specifically the transportation between the places. Because today I was starting to move out of the place where I'm currently staying, and I have a lot of stuff, and I don't want to stress to move it all at the same time. So I had to move partially. Was it a stressful day? I wouldn't say so, but I do feel that the questions of transportation of me personally have to be resolved at this stage, because I'm an extremely ambitious individual and I see where I'm going. And I want to make sure that I feel, back to that first point that Joyce made, is that security. I feel secure. So if I have hacked the idea of having access to money, which provides some levels of security, I feel that the infrastructure can even provide a further levels of security for us as individuals. We're talking about identity here. Us as individuals in this call, everyone who's tuning in, who is very interested in the topic and being active and conversing about these things publicly, it's cool to provide some security levels at the steps of infrastructure, which I mean directly, not needing to show my identity as I travel between places, and not need to show my face in cameras as I travel around. And yeah, and questioning the purpose of traveling by planes, on a long-term basis, understanding how much time is required to be invested in a certain location for it to make it home. And that feeling of home and ownership of my time and space within that location is what I'm also exploring as I'm exploring the notion of network states and being good, feeling great in one of the locations that I'm attending or I'm being part of and being engaged in. I'm a traveler. My identity currently is a nomad. Coming from that perspective, you see, I'm like this, I can't even set up my, camera properly because every time I'm choosing different location and it's always like this new chapter. And I feel like what I'd like to take, like the audience take away from my talk right now is figuring out your place. What are those homes? Have you traveled enough to know which places you're attracted by, where you feel at home, considering the current rules that the communities have at that time, in that location? So I see myself not as a migrant, but as a conscious immigrant. I've been immigrating to the United States since I was 17, going through this whole process. It took me about 15 years to realize that, no, thank you. Coming back home and figuring out where home is, the back home being on the continent where I'm at, geographical location, living in the EU, seeing very different type of rules that are cultural rules, I may say, that are in this part of the world compared to my New York experience, for example, and trying to rebuild New York everywhere I go, being considered as abnormal, not being quite accepted. So creating my own home, whether I go to one place or another, is the key for me. And figuring out the transportation between those and figuring out the security of transportations, which goes into communications, right? Like transportation and communication security, I feel go hand in hand. Then the last thing I'd like to also share here, the point I'd like to make, what are those free trade agreements we can make early between these network states, right? How can we address that as we're addressing, hopefully, some kind of more or less universal legal system? Okay, I think I wrapped it up for now. Let me know if you have any questions to what I said. There's a lot of points.
Thanks a lot, Nataliya. Thanks a lot. Definitely, we are going to touch base during the Q&A session. And Andrew, now your turn. Please share your experience or your expertise within this very tough topic of identity ideology.
Yeah, sure thing. Let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm outside. We're having a little bit of a windstorm here. But if it's real noisy, I'll go inside. So as far as ideology and identity are concerned, which are the theme of this evening's webinar, I look at, for example, ideology, and you look at the two great powers that emerged in the 20th century, and they were both ideological in nature, right? We have the United States of America and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. These are two ideologically created countries, if you will. There is no real American race. There was no real Soviet race. I know there were efforts to mold a sort of new man, a new Soviet. There were efforts at making everybody American, whether you had Irish or Armenian or Jewish heritage, a sort of assimilation. So on that level, it's interesting that you'll see that ideologies can morph into identity, and sometimes identities turn into ideologies. Then we look at identity itself, and it's a difficult subject to try and pin down, because what we see a lot of times now is, well, what exactly is a Frenchman? How is he different than a German? Okay, so there's the language. Is there a religious difference? Well, no, you could have a French Catholic and a German Catholic, and the German Catholic could know French and the French Catholic could know German. So how exactly are they different? And I think this gets to be sort of at the root, at the core of what it is when we talk about identity in a traditional sense. In a more unconventional sense, some people might say, well, left-handed people form a certain identity. I think that might be a component of a person's identity, but it might not be the totality of a person's identity. Just like sexuality, that's one part of a person's identity. For some people, they've chosen to make sexuality the totality of their identity. That's their choice. They're free to do as they wish. At the same time, I'd like to think that human beings are more than the language we speak, the religion that we practice, right? The color of our skin. Am I a left-handed person, a right-handed person? Am I a man? Am I a woman? Do I identify this way or that way? So it's an interesting question to delve into what constitutes a person's identity. And do people that have a similar identity, do they seek to come together for whatever reason? And we see this with the network state movement, that people that have similar ideological identities have decided to come together. So people that might feel more anarcho-capitalist or more libertarian or more voluntarist, they may seek to come together and form communities that are more like-minded, where they see more eye to eye on certain things. So I think what we're seeing now with the internet and this great movement toward decentralization is a great realignment. I don't think it's so much a great reset or a great, build back better. No, I think it's a great realignment that we're seeing with humanity, where people are aligning themselves in a way that they want, not in the way that their ancestors did or that they are told to live. And I think that's liberating. And that's the ultimate manifestation of individual personal liberation is to exercise your freedom. It's the opportunity to live life the way that you would want to live it. And we're starting to see that in all sorts of different stripes and shades and denominations. And I think it's a good thing. Sometimes people make fun of people that are, transgendered, people that want to identify this way or that way. I don't, not because of any other reason than I'm in the business of self-identification, right? If you're a network state person, if you're a guy or a gal or a person that wants to build new communities, new cities, new countries, you're in the self-identification business. You're in the tribe building business. You're in the community building business. So I'm not here to judge or to state that the way that one person identifies themselves is incorrect, because I don't want them to turn around and do that to me. Now, if they do that, then we have a whole different situation. But for the most part, circling back to network states themselves, for the most part, it is a libertarian, it is a voluntarist, it is an anarcho-capitalist, it is a minarchist, limited government type, objectivist even type movement from what I can tell. It doesn't mean that left-wing people or staunch conservatives or alt-right types don't have a role or a place in the kaleidoscope, if you will, that is network states or building new countries or whatever you want to call it. It's for the most part let's call it a general libertarian type movement, and we are seeing a sort of ethnogenesis, if you will, emerge that's come through this ideology. And people that may never have gotten the chance to know each other, that may have never even thought about becoming friends, are friends and are becoming colleagues and peers because they have this common strain, this common value that they ascribe to, and more freedom, don't tread on me, monolave, whatever it is you want to use. And I think that's real interesting. I like that. I think that's a cool thing. I think it's a really cool thing that we're seeing in this great realignment. So it means less to be Canadian, it means less to be German, and it means more to be something else, something of your own making, of your own choosing. But real fast before I wrap up, what is interesting to note is one of the strengths that I find the countries of the Americas versus the old world is that anybody can become Brazilian, anybody can become Argentinian, Chilean. It's much easier to assimilate to the countries of the New World than it is the countries of the Old World. I know that I could study the Armenian language, I could convert to the Armenian church, I could become an Armenian citizen, but does that really make me Armenian? On a certain level, it does. But on another level, it really doesn't. And I think that's okay. That's totally fine. And I accept that. I'm never going to be Korean. I'm never going to be Japanese. That's okay. That's fine. I accept that for what it is. I can adopt a lot of their mannerisms and their ideas, but does that make me so? I don't know. That's the eye of the beholder, right? But hey, everybody on this panel, we could all move to Brazil tomorrow. We could learn Portuguese. We could master it. We could do what the Brazilians do. And oddly enough, in about 10 years, 5 years, not only would we be Brazilian citizens, we'd be Brazilian and nobody would be the wiser. And I think that's where some of these newer countries have such an advantage over the older traditional countries. Not to say that older traditional countries are bad. They're not. They're great. They're the foundation. They're the layer one. They're the bedrock. And they are to be loved and cherished for what they are. I'm just saying, hey, let's go out there and make some new ones. And we get to be the pioneers. We get to be the founding fathers. We get to be the people that are the great. We get to be our own legends. And that's what's so brilliant about this. That's what's so empowering about this. We get to be the ancient kings of old, but today, right now. And that's the way that I see this, because what I've noticed with a lot of these new arrangements that we're seeing is that there are no founding myths. There are no, it's okay, we come together, I read Ayn Rand, you read Mises, I read Rothbard, you read Friedman, very nice, no problem, that's cool, we can have interesting discussions, but there's a little bit more. You want to create a new civilization, a new country, a new something, a new tribe, there's got to be a little bit more. There's a little bit of magic. There's a little bit of a, dare I even say it, soul involved. There's a little bit of that. There has to be. I think us human beings are a little bit more than just these large language learning machines that have skin and organs. So, right. And with that being said, I would love to see some more literature emerge, more music, more culture that people can rally behind and embrace, because I think that shared experience is a very core component of identity. So I will yield back the balance of my time so we can move forward.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. Thanks a lot for a very interesting intervention. Actually, what I do consider it, actually, Jim commented something super interesting regarding the identity drivers, like history. I do consider the old nations, if we have a club of all nations, old nations, put it bluntly that way, like Armenians, I don't know, Iranians, which we call Persians, I mean, as our neighbors, or Chinese, Indians, right? I mean, so basically, these, I think we have the old club and the new club. If we can somehow divide the world that way, maybe an old club and the new club, because in the old club, people uh, people who end up in the old club, it is very difficult for them to accept new people from outside, plus for themselves to become, new club members, put it bluntly. For example, even if you end up in Brazil, even if you learn, Portuguese, etc. So in the end of the day, if someone asks me who I am, I would definitely say that I'm Armenian. So that's a very interesting thing to explore. Regarding the identity, I think this is not only because of the language. This is not only because uh, of the of the religion. I think this is also because of the sense of history that you have on you. I think that is because you're not necessarily Jewish or Armenian because of your blood. I think you are Jewish or Armenian or Greek because of the historical sense that you have in your brain. The way you sense history. So that's the way. How your mentality and your world horizon, is getting built up. I think this is one of the key things. But of course, when we consider that we are seeing a new wave of world change, right? We have internet entering into the lives of everyone now, and that is kind of destroying the boundaries and the borders, actually. So I think this has already been playing a very big impact, and I think it will, in the end of the day, it will kind of either abolish the foundations of this historical sense because of the new generations who would come, so they will kind of pivot to new things, or it will it will maybe enrich that division of old clubs and new clubs. And I think that what we are seeing in this era now is this civilizational dichotomy, civilizational gap that we are seeing. And that civilizational gap is, when I say the transhumanistic project and humanistic project, we can also call it on this aspect. Regarding, this aspect, like, you have old club people who want to preserve their identity based on that historical sense. And the examples are, for example, I don't know, many examples: Armenians, Jewish, Greek, Iranian, Chinese, etc. And the new club members. Like we mentioned. Las Americas, like the Americas. Whatever. I lived in Colombia. I definitely share what Andrew said. I could even end up working with the Colombian government. If I stayed for a year or two more, that's it. I would definitely end up working there as a Colombian. Definitely. What I'm trying to say is that this identity question is a pressing issue now during these wars that we see, hot wars that we see, like Russia, Ukraine, in the Middle East, and plus also these cold wars that we are seeing now. Just countries getting ready to attack each other. These hybrid wars, Third World War. Current that we feel in the air, and then I think this plays a very big role. And that's where I think the world will get new ideological currents very soon. I'm absolutely certain, because we are in a chaotic crisis now because of this identity issue, and these new ideological currents will come to solve it. I don't know when it will be, maybe tomorrow, maybe in 2025, or maybe in 2030. But this is where I see the huge possibility that the network states and these new establishments can play, because this is a very new paradigm and very new, unconventional and attractive current that most people who look for ways out of these problems can definitely explore. So sorry for my, I mean, long intervention, but um, we can have questions, of course, but I see that we have a very interesting discussion going in the chat section. But please, who has questions, please raise your hand, and we can, Ophelia can unmute you so you can ask question before we jump to. Okay, Jim has a question. Ophelia, please unmute Jim. So Jim.
Jim, please unmute yourself because you have an access.
Thanks, very good discussion. Thank you for the panelists. Very insightful discussions. We talk about the old world, right? The Eurasian continent in terms of the history, the myths, the cohesion, even with Armenia, right? The richness of again the culture, the history, all these narratives, and then the new world countries that I think both Aya and also Andrew had mentioned about, with the example of Brazil, even the United States, as proposition countries that are essentially melting pots, but very diverse. I guess the question for panelists is, I think going along with what Vahram was talking about this opportunity of having network states, right, as the next potential next step in evolution. What sorts of glutes could the network states have to get people from diverse locales together and sustain them? Right? We have the old world, in the Eurasian continent, you have countries like Iran, China, Korea, Japan that had history that sustained for thousands of years that held people together. In Europe, you had, for example, in northern countries, you had these myths that were very much, not just northern countries, but in many different countries, they had myths that were ingrained as part of the culture or religion, right? In terms of the Jewish diaspora, in terms of Israel, for example, other nation states, you had culture and the religion as a part of the identity that held people together. You can argue that for the nations of the United States, you had the American idea to some extent that at least for a certain time, I know there are a lot of divisions, whether it's the United States or Brazil nowadays, but at least to some extent, you had the proposition, the idea, the American idea that held people together. What would be some potential glues that would hold a emergent network state together, assuming that at least if we go with the Balajian idea of network states, you have people in various locales who mostly come from various places. I guess one argument could be that there's that the Balajian idea is more of a one commandment, right? Everyone who is a part of a Starr society follows this one commandment, a die-hard one commandment. But other than one commandment, are there any other potential suggestions, ideas in terms of glues that could work in the context of digital, online, at least in the beginning, online societies where people come all the place from all sorts of different cultures, where the traditional types of glues or nation states would not work as well?
Thanks a lot, Jim, for a very interesting comment and question about the network state as a new haven, new establishment. I may definitely answer, but I talked a lot. Who else? Joyce, maybe you, Natalia, or Andrew. Who wants to answer to this question?
Well, I think the network state gives people a chance to come together and decide on not just the ideologies that, like you said, I've read Rothbard, I've read Friedman, but what rules do you all want? And I believe that the lesson of Morazan has been, I mean, these are Hondurans of all different walks of life and stuff, but they're mostly workers. And what brings them together is that they've agreed on these rules. And I think that's a more telling way to form identity, that they like the problems with the diversity in Brazil or the US is because people don't agree on rules. That's the big polarization that there's so much disagreement on. The network state has the opportunity to bring together people that do share those beliefs. This is the way people should live together. So that's, to me, is a great way to form identity. And even among like the Armenian identity, you've got people who disagree about the kind of rules they want. So that brings the people within that community who agree on the same rules can form a community and a society that can be harmonious and bring more fulfillment to everyone, rather than trying to put together, well, you guys were born in the same country, therefore you have to live together. So that's the big promise of free cities and network states.
Thanks a lot, Joyce. Actually, I will add something on this. As I said, you need I mean, because of the time that we are living, and because of the changes we are seeing, and because of the wars, cold and hot wars and hybrid wars that we are seeing, I think we are going to have these new ideological currents, and we are actually having them. But I don't want to politicize the webinar, but I'm gonna give you a very interesting example for you to understand how things are done in Asia, in one Asian country, which is our neighbor, Turkey. So if you look at Turkey, how Turkey functions and how the identity is getting born there, this is very interesting. If you look at the Ottoman Empire that used to live there, right? I mean, before the Republic of Turkey was born in 1923. So basically, the Ottoman Empire was an empire of many nations. We all know, I mean, many nations were living there: Armenians, Greeks, Jewish, I mean, Turks, etc. So the term Turk, the name Turk, was the most offending term, because Turks were like the least wanted, I mean, like elements of the society, put it bluntly that way. I mean, like peasants, I mean, who were not active in the society, etc. But you see, when we had this pan-Turkist project, I mean, getting born in the end of the 19th century, and when we had the Republic of Turkey in the 20th century, so in blood terms, so I can say that half of Turkey are not Turks in blood terms. They are Greeks, they are Armenians, they are other, I mean, definitely, of course. I mean, for example, one of the network state members, our network state, Armenian network state member, is the first Greek ambassador to Armenia, Leonidas Chrysantopoulos, who gave us very interesting details about this hidden Armenians, hidden Greeks, etc. That we call that way, like either crypto Armenians or hidden Armenians, hidden Greeks. But one of the things, one of the interesting things is that, I mean, the Turkish identity is getting born using the state apparatus. This is one of the most important things. So that means that through police, through army, etc., or through brainwashing, through education, etc., people would build up identity, which is Turk. This is very interesting thing, and so that means that the network state, as Joyce said, I mean, when you build up a rule, but of course, I mean, our main advantage over the Turkish example is that we are voluntary and we don't put repressions on people, because we are open to people who truly want, from the bottom of their heart, want to join these communities. Is that if you kind of build up an infrastructure, you kind of start building an identity. Though I also must agree with Jim, who commented that during the crisis, severe crisis, I mean hot wars, very difficult times, the ethnic identities rise. So this is the divisions between ethnic identities in a heterogeneous society will definitely, I mean, have a say. Like, I mean, in America, imagine the United States having a very big, I mean, trouble. I'm absolutely certain that we will have some ethnic problems there. That's my opinion. I'm not saying that you must agree or with what I'm saying, but that's my opinion. That's where these old club people like Armenians, Chinese, etc. So they are kind of robust to this type of changes. So whatever happens, you don't get into that trap of big wars or whatever. So you still keep your identity as an Armenian. But in the end of the day, this network state current, I think it will be at least one of the most developed platforms to build identity. I'm absolutely certain, and that's what I mean. I always say that the coordinated action must serve that agenda of building that identity, and that identity will also be built on political level, on geopolitical level, on social level, on cultural level, educational level. So, but I would also like Andrew to answer this question. We are a bit short of time, but we can add some 10 minutes more if you
Yes,
don't mind.
certainly. I will take a try at it. And a few things as I was listening to Jim's question is, we're living in a world where in almost all countries, when people are in a marriage and they don't want to stay married, they can get divorced. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but they can do these things. You don't like where you're living in most places, you can leave, right? There's a fair amount of freedom that already exists, whether it's to leave a spouse, whether it's to leave town, whether it's to leave an employer, whether it's to, right? There's so many different choices that are available to each of us. And what I'm seeing with network states, with charter cities, with special economic zones, with all of these types of instruments and devices is that there are other choices. There are other ways of living, and you get to design that. That's the genius of this, is you get to design it, you get to be a part of it, you get to pick a flavor that resonates, that meshes, that gels with you. And I think that's so empowering. And so I don't like to think of it in terms of words like divorce, like even though I just mentioned that, or secession, or any of these divisive, vitriolic type terms. I think of it more as, you're not walking away from something. You're not walking away from the United States, or you're walking away from Canada. You're walking towards something. You're walking to something better that just works for you. It doesn't mean the United States is a horrible, evil country. It might be for some people, but for other people it works, and that's okay. I understand that, for some people, they're very bitter about Germany. You're not able to homeschool your children in Germany. I've met countless Germans in Mexico and elsewhere. They were forcing vaccines on us, and they were telling us we couldn't homeschool. And I understand those feelings. That's legitimate. I think people's feelings matter and count. But what's even more interesting is, I'm here. I'm here in Mexico. I'm here in Canada. I'm here in a new place because I want to be. Not so much because of the push factors, but the pull factors, right? It's more attractive here. Maybe the grass is greener, ironically. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is more of a hopeful and positive and optimistic type message that I think all of this really encapsulates. And so, trying to go back to Jim's question, which I really liked a lot. Back in the days when the United States and Canada, Australia, New Zealand were being settled. I know that there were obviously people living there before European arrival. I do understand this. It was said, though, that Europeans, they were the donor civilizations, the donor countries, right? So Great Britain, France, the Netherlands, to other countries, they were the donors. Well, what's really neat now is now all of us get to be donors to new countries, new civilizations, new cities. So it's interesting. It's not just one part of the world that's supplying a lot of the pioneers and settlers. Now it's all of us. It's all of us. And I understand that all civilizations have expanded and contracted and expanded again. And, even Russia, they expanded deep into Siberia, and China went in a different direction towards Central Asia historically. And that's fine. And that's just the trajectory of humanity. But now we're in a situation where we all get to play such an interesting role in this. On the micro and macro level. So that's where I see a lot of this going. And it's great. We get to meet people that are like us, where we might be more in agreement. Although a little bit of disagreement is good. A little bit of constructive criticism can be healthy when it's done nicely. When it's done with the objective of in furtherance of a goal, that's great. That's cool. When it's just disagreeing for the heck of it, that's not cool. That's not so cool, in my view. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Thanks a lot. And you're very interesting, definitely. And I do agree. And yeah, I think the next topic of our this webinar series will be about power. I mean, how in the end of the day we exercise power on global stage. This is very interesting. Internal power and external power. Like, I mean, how you imagine that we build a very big network state. How we establish power institutions there. We understand that it is voluntary, but in the end of the day, you need to have some power. Whether it is a decentralized power or a centralized power, and also the external level, vis-a-vis the nation states. Because in the end of the day, if you build a new establishment, then you have to deal with the nation states, and you will have power, whether it's a military power, diplomatic power, lobbying power, financial power. You need to exercise it. You need, first of all, to possess it, and then to exercise it. So that's why this ideology is the key thing. And if we happen to be successful, not if, actually, when we happen to be successful, because I'm sure that at some point we will be successful. When we happen to be successful with building this new establishment, whether we call it a network state or new account or whatever, ideology is key, because when we reach people's hearts, not only brains but also hearts, I think that will play a major role, because that way we will actually, not on in theory, but actually shake the foundations of the current establishments. Definitely. So because if you reach people's hearts, that's a very different thing. And that's how one of my dreams within these network state movements actually has always been this aggressive culture propaganda in positive sense. Culture propaganda like movies, documentaries and everything, like how to engage broader public globally, so that people get to know more about, I mean, these new establishments, things, and get attached to them. So this is a bit of policy making already, because I mean we are talking about some steps, but I think this is a key to build that ideology. And I think one of the uh, key challenges is that we must take care that the ideology behind these network state movements is benign and not malign. I mean, so it comes to serve the world, to serve a harmonious world, and not like divisions or whatever. So this is very important. Like the network states themselves must be a means and not an end. An end must be that harmonious world that we want to build. So if we happen, if when we start working on these on actual steps, I think we will be very successful. We can just have one more question and we finish in 4 minutes. If you don't get angry with me, please, just 4 minutes because this is a very interesting uh, discussion. So one more question. So maybe from the text that we have, or anyone else who has any comments or intervention or question. Just 4 minutes,
I
please.
think I want to add like what makes up culture. I was thinking about it every day, and I was thinking about what I need every day to stay alive. I think that, we want to keep going and keep creating. Um, like good food, good drinks, they really motivate me somehow. I was thinking how addicted I am to certain food items. It's not about that. What I realize is that my body needs really certain type of nutrition at certain periods of time to promote greatest health. Yeah. And yeah, I think we have not touched upon health here. I'd like to put it in this place. Healthcare and ability to access that, whatever that means for every individual that would like to be part of our communities, is also something I feel we all do care about, as it goes into probably security as a prevention. If we're happy, joyful citizens, then how can we attack anyone, right? And who would want to attack us if we are in a safe place, I guess. Yeah, and I guess I just dropped the question of locations and how much like access to certain food that I personally would choose depends on my location, and that access to clean food and clean air really does affect my personal health, and hopefully, you know, my community and my people can live on the land where that access is granted without expecting anyone to see it as service. I don't know, maybe it's too much to ask, but I don't want to pay for my food. Right there.
Thanks a lot, Natalia. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I think um, there was an interesting discussion going on in the country founders group about this location stuff. I mean, where you feel that it's your home, right? And Andrew, you also commented. I remember when John actually was asking about because of the problems that Armenians are facing with the Turks and Azeris. I mean, why aren't there some rich Armenians who don't buy an island? I mean, or a big space. I mean, big land, and all Armenians end up there. And yeah, I definitely commented that there were Armenians. I mean, who wanted to do that, and there were some projects like that. But that never, I mean, found. I mean, be ground. I mean, within the Armenian world, because that historical sense that you have on you as a nation and the symbols which are very important. I mean, the symbols are very important, like Mountain Ararat that we have. I mean, it's our symbol, like Fuji for Japanese people. Mountain Ararat is for us. I mean, so how come you can leave Mount Ararat and end up in a different place? Of course, I mean, I individually can, but if you end up to living it as a nation, that I think was the point of you being that nation anymore, right? I mean, so you are not that nation anymore. So this is a very interesting thing. I mean, this identity ideology stuff is very very interesting, and I think that we have a huge opportunities and big platform to work on. And I also remember that when I was in Minneapolis, it was 2015, some 9 years ago, Minnesota. I remember that some teenagers were arrested, and they were telling the police that they wanted to go and fight for ISIS, Islamic State. And when they were asked why they want to go there, they said that because Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the then leader of the ISIS, told us who we are. So that's a very interesting thing. So basically, that ISIS guy could brainwash these teenagers, so that they belong to his community or whatever, right? But this is a very interesting thing. I mean, to think on, to reflect upon, because we see that there is, because of this identity crisis, of this globalization currents, because of the globalization current, there is a huge vacuum that we must fill in a positive way, and that positive way will serve this harmonious world, and the network state movement is here to serve it. If we when we start, I mean, working on this actually as a coordinated global team, a global establishment, we will be definitely successful with this. So what I would say is that the next topic, as I said, will be about the power structure of these network states, new countries, internal and external. And again, thank you all for your comments and for your speeches and sharing your experiences with us and with the audience. This will be shared with 2,000 plus decision makers globally. We have we have that database. The Panarmenian Network State has that database. We share with them. I mean, diplomatic corps, government representatives, not only regarding Armenia but also globally, senators, parliamentarians, also influencers, and our clubs, of course. I mean, network staters, free charter city people. So people see these discussions and they reach them, and the discussion can be continued. I mean, on via different channels. Thanks a lot again. I'm very happy that we could cover some topics, and unfortunately, time is short. I mean, we couldn't. We could talk, of course, much on this because this is a very interesting and hot topic, but time is short. But we will definitely come back to this. Thanks a lot again, everyone, and see you soon next month with the next webinar. Bye bye.